In this video, we're going to talk about getting a second color going in the same pick or in the same sequence. And then we're also going to talk about hatching. So let's start by just taking a look at where I am as I come up to my loom. I always do this, by the way, when I step up to the loom to see what was I doing when I left. So where we are right now is my hand is in the shed that was last woven. I've got this light green yarn that was spliced in over this day separator. So I am ready to start using this, the light green yarn, as my next day at my next temperature. But I've decided to take a little design plunge into doing something different. So I'm going to mix it up a little bit, and that's where our new color and our hatching are going to come in. So I just changed my shed, so I'm in the next shed ready to go. And this yarn is going to come in for meat. That means adding another color of yarn, I also have to bring it in into meat. So I'm going to bring a different color, this dark green, in with the front end to meet the other yarn. And you can see over here I've been doing as I have been throughout these videos, and just going ahead and unplying my yarn before I get weaving so that I've got one less thing to deal with. So I'm going to change my shed. Here's a little practice weaving in those ends. So I'm going to go in, and I can actually just pick up the other ones with my fingers is another way to get those in quickly. So I brought each of those in, 2 warp threads in. Now I'm going to take my dark green and go back out. And remember that in meet and separate, one of your 2 yarns goes directly back and the other one is going to need to wrap around that spare warp thread that was sitting behind. I'll show you that on the next one. So I've gotten them both in the separate mode, and now I'm going to go back into meet. However, I'm going to do something tricky this time. I'm going to take this, you can see where I've pre-marked this warp thread, and marking your warp threads is a great way to track your design. You can use a Sharpie that has permanent ink and draw directly on the warp to give yourself clues about where you're going next. So I create my little hill there, and I'm only going to bring the light green one in this far. So in this space between these 2 marked warp threads, I'll go from the top so you can see a little better. Right here, I'm using the dark green on this pass. Get my bubbles and go ahead and beat that in. Now I'm going to return. And here's what I was referring to just a second ago on meet and separate, just as a reminder that whenever you do meet and separate, you're going to have this spot right here between these 2 weft threads that you have to decide who goes over the top of that one thread. This is where the marked warps that I did earlier really help. The area between the marked warps is the place where I want the dark green and the light green to overlap. So I don't want to take the dark green beyond that. I want to keep it inside that. So that one goes there. And this is the one that reaches around that spare warp and comes back. Make my bubbles. Beat that in. And so you can see what we've got starting to develop is you've got a light green stripe and then a dark green stripe over the top of it. Guess what we're going to do next? We're going to take the light green over to this last marked warp where we marked where we were going to do this. Get your bubbles, beat it in, and you know, again, just a word on bubbles. I'm always putting them in different places. You can see as I go. Okay, so here's where we have to make that decision. Who goes over, which one goes over this raised thread? The light green is the one that's going inside my little box for the pattern here. So the light green goes straight back. We don't want it reaching beyond its range, so to speak. So we want the dark green to go. Whoops, that was the wrong dark green thread that I picked up from the table. Here's the one that's on the loom, dark green thread in the middle. And we've covered that, and we know which bundle or which thread to use to cover it because we've marked the warp. Now we're going to reach with the dark green, and I'm reaching my hand right under, we talked about that in the other video, the place where I want the weft thread to end, and that just helps me pick the right place. You can do the same thing. This is a Murex, so I've got a shedding device, but you can do the same thing if you are manually picking your shed or if you're using a shed stick to open it up. So here we've got that decision of point again. We've got this as the exposed, make that a little bigger. So this is the exposed raised warp thread that is our decision. Here is our marked warp thread. So if we take this dark green around that one, it's going to go one step too far, and our very defined little box here will not be so well defined. It'll have a little edge that wandered off. So we want to do that. And you can see we're going to do the same thing again, the light green over to that farther marked thread, and just alternating like that. That's all hatching is just laying a line of one color over the edge of a line of a different color. If you look at kind of classical, say classical French tapestries, a lot of the edges of things, of flowers and plants, all kinds of things are done with this technique. We're doing it very straight across and stopping at the exact same point on each pass across. This is called regular hatching when you do it like this, when it's very regular and it's always starting and stopping at exactly the same place. There's also irregular hatching, which can be used to show shadowing or to show a shape. So two completely different methods of doing that. And if you wanted to go online and take a look at some tapestries, you'll see examples of this all over the place. It's a technique that's used just as often as cross-hatching might be in drawing to create shadows, depth, outlines of things, all kinds of things. So that is regular hatching. And then after we do a video about building shapes, I'll also show you the version that is irregular hatching. Hope you had fun learning one more design element. And before we go, I'll just again do like I've been doing in all the different videos. We've got these little ends, and as you work, you can just pull them up from the cloth, put your scissors flat, and right with a sharp tip, cut those little ends off. And there you go, a very clean tapestry with two colors now and some hatching.